I am honestly shocked.
This is quite a shock! On the other hand, it's not surprising in the least.
HBO's The Last of Us Part 2 has taken a dramatic turn in its adaptation of the controversial second game, and clawed itself out of the narrative box that was left by the previous writers and directors. You have to realize the main takeaway from this: Neil actually had to implicitly admit he was wrong. Look at him in this post-interview. That's the face of a man who knows he done messed up. And I literally can't tell you how satisfying this truly is, because it's a rebuff against the large bunch of garbage that spewed out of the original game. As I've said in previous videos, I can actually see the direction the game was trying to take, but for a myriad of reasons, I won't rehash it here in this video, it objectively did not work out. For anyone who actually thought that the second game was perfect, or good for doing the Joel situation the way it did, I ask you, why would it need to be changed for the television show? Are TV audiences just not as sophisticated as us intellectual Reddit tier gamers? The second episode of HBO's The Last of Us Part 2 changed a great many details about the entire prologue of the game. And it's actually impressive how the writers managed to maintain the original message of what it was trying to convey, but portray it in a way that is totally coherent and comprehensible. Now, you could be someone who's either played The Last of Us or someone who hasn't and is just watching the show for the first time, and follow each narrative decision from point A to point B logically and understandably. That's not to say every choice in this episode was perfect, but it's leagues better than the portrayal we got of the same exact situation in the game. And I'm almost to the point where I will tempt people to just skip playing part 2 and see where the show is going to take us. Like, what world are we in where the show's adaptation is better than the actual game? I suppose the bar was set pretty low, based on audience reviews and sentiments from one angry Shuckle-based YouTuber, but I still want to talk today about everything that went totally right in this episode of the show. Let's start with a brief recap of a few changes from the game that were apparent in the first episode that I really didn't mind because I thought they were helpful to the story. The show introduces Abby and the ex-Fireflies immediately after the events of St. Mary's Hospital, and draws a clear narrative distinction between each faction right away. The dance that Ellie and Dina share is also present in the first episode, which didn't happen until nearly halfway into the original game, and an allusion to the very last cutscene of the game is shown in this first episode. However, it's not elaborated on. I actually quite like that because it shows something has happened, and the second episode makes that clear, but the audience isn't privy to the details just yet. But these narrative breadcrumbs are better than outright subversion from the original writers, so we're off to a good start. It's here in the second episode where things changed pretty drastically from the game, and I was enjoying each engagement. Since there were talks of the stalker from the first episode rumbling about, the town is preparing for potential dangers through the course of drills and such. While these were alluded to during the game, actually seeing one played out was not expected, but heavily appreciated. And this is thematically conveyed through the weather, which during this entire episode builds up to a blizzard with the Horde charging at Jackson and Joel's eventual fate in the end. Weather in the seasons can play such a key role in narratives. I mean, they've been used in classic stories from like The Great Gatsby to the original Last of Us game. As Jesse and Ellie are walking to see Maria, we notice a few major changes from the game. It starts out pretty much line for line from the game, but then divulges to crucial details that Joel and Dina are on patrol together, and Ellie and Joel have had some discussion, even though we don't know what it is. This radically changes the dynamic of Ellie's response to Joel going missing. As it was shown in the game, Ellie and Dina blow off their patrol duties to get high and bump uglies while Joel is getting very disrespectfully beaten to a pulp. This had absolutely no crucial narrative significance in the game other than to push some explicit message from the creators that was shallow and uninspired, and now has completely been cut. This is a good thing. Nature is healing. And the show, they even removed the meme of the Bigot sandwich. Like, this isn't The Last of Us 2 without the Bigot sandwich. The meme immediately set the tone of the original game as something that was a completely unserious endeavor from the writer's perspective, and was only used as cannon fodder to push a specific kind of message. And I don't know if it was Neil, Craig, or HBO who realized this would not play well with general audiences, but it's cut. That's because insulting your audience is not a good way to make things work. The game is totally unserious when the storm on the horizon should be brewing and making the characters uneasy and unsteady. This uneasiness does twofold elements properly with its characters, at least in the show. It keeps the narrative focused on the goal of having Joel and Dina, two characters Ellie cares about the most, separated from her, and also demonstrates Tommy's responsibility as a leader to not abandon his community. With Joel and Dina being gone, Ellie and Jesse go on patrol, leaving Tommy and Maria to defend Jackson. And with the spores of mycelium planted at the end of the first episode, the show is about to use that creative liberty in one of the most unique ways possible it could have. More on that in just a moment. With Ellie and Jesse sort of focused on what they need to do, though not entirely because there's a few nods to the original game, these characters are given a chance to breathe and talk for just more than a handful of seconds before they are dispatched immediately. Jesse wants to follow in Tommy's footsteps, and that ambition is made very clear, which also gives credence to why he, out of all people, would be trusted to go out with Ellie on patrol. Ellie in the show has been portrayed more as a rebellious teen, but the maturity of how this situation is already sets it up for the better. The actual first scene in the second episode is of Abby and her group, and where it explicitly states they are here to kill Joel, reiterating the same message from the first episode. And only Joel. That's another moral code that was sort of portrayed in the second game, but never really said why, and it's kind of weird and confusing, and it doesn't make sense. More of that is explored in Abby's monologue with Joel. They're shown in a similar way as it was in the game, as Abby decides to run off and find Joel on her own. She's tracking someone, she doesn't realize it's Joel just yet, then the entire horde situation happens, just like in the game. She's saved by Joel, but this time with Dina alongside him instead of Tommy. And it's here where Abby finds the man she's looking for, not through a bending over backwards of a character by putting him in a situation where he would virtually never find himself in, but Abby simply overhearing Joel's name being mentioned by Dina. Yes, very plot convenient that she found him immediately, but it was in the game. It wasn't like Joel just introduced himself and was like, hey there, I'm Joel, ready to die, you know? What's shown in the show is so much more natural by comparison. And this is incredible because it causes her to think on her feet, to not only lure him to her encampment, but also put Joel in a tough situation with the siege of Infected on Jackson. And my goodness, let's talk about that for a moment, because that was a completely new and added sequence that was so bombastic and wonderful that I was shocked that this episode even wanted to include it in the first place. Set aside the miserable filming conditions for a second, and just appreciate the simple fact that this gives a clear and concrete reason for why the rest of Jackson, this heavily armed town, is not trying to find Joel, Tommy's own brother. Tommy's preoccupied. He has to defend his community. This gives a perfect rationale for why Joel couldn't get the support that he needed. And another quick note, the action sequence was completely brilliant because it followed through on the mycelium being found in the town, redirecting the horde towards Jackson. Not only was this an incredibly creative situation, but it led for some pretty great moments of fan service and Easter eggs that were included, such as Tommy using a flamethrower to roast some portobello bloaters, like one would in the original game, or dogs being used to hunt the infected, which were a new element introduced in the second game. So this brings us to the moment of truth, the most challenging scene for HBO's The Last of Us Part 2 to cover. What did I think of it? It's good. I'm not saying it's great, besides the fact that all the actors gave stellar performances, maybe -1, but there have been some massive improvements. Firstly, Abby explicitly tells Joel exactly why she wants to kill him. And Joel realizes, oh, I done messed up. She even explains how she found him, what it means for her and her moral code, and why taking away her father ruined her life. Sometimes monologues go on for too long. And, well, we all have things to do and places to be in life. The Incredibles satirized the entire concept of monologues, and sometimes we forget they can be pretty necessary for putting pieces of a director's vision together. And I'm honestly okay with that, because when you ignore the very basic aspects of storytelling, it jumbles your narrative for no good reason. Now, this could always go the other way. Like, infamously, the Sly 2 Band of Thieves monologue at the end of the game. I'm not saying you have to explain away everything right away, but we need to know, why is Abby coming after Joel? That's really why it matters. Why should we care about this character in the first place? Because if you're gonna go through all of this investment with Abby, you better give us a reason to be invested in her. And don't wait halfway through the story to give us that reason. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. We wait and wait and wait in the game for it, and by the time it comes up, we've lost all sympathy for her. This show wants to make it explicitly clear, where it will draw a narrative line so that people can follow them. A very good litmus test is my dad, who I watched watch this show with. He never played the game, but it's fun to actually be watching the show with him. It's also really funny and fitting because we bought the very last copy of the original Last of Us 1 at Best Buy in 2013 on release date because I needed him to be there because I couldn't buy M-rated games for myself at the time. He went into this episode without knowing what was going to happen, and after the death of Joel, I asked him, hey, what did you think? He wasn't mad, he wasn't seething. He said it made sense that you gotta see the loss of a character in anything, like even when you're watching a Disney movie like The Lion King. He got the point that the game was trying to make and failed to convey, and the show is making right now and succeeding to convey. And they don't disrespect Joel in nearly the same way that it happened in the game. There's some interesting choices, like having him go to therapy, which personally I wouldn't peg him as that type of guy. He strikes me more as the someone who lets it bottle up inside and doesn't really need the therapy, so I'm not surprised. Also, the therapist is the mom from Home Alone, like, dang, I really feel old now. But the infamous golf club scene is used mostly to make him suffer by slamming his open wound on the leg, rather than beating his brains out, so, you know, that's better. The final blow doesn't even come from her splattering his brains with the golf club. Okay, I'm sorry. I gotta remind myself, don't complain too much about the original one. It's just so surprising, like who thought this was a good idea? The creators instead give him a death that's worth watching, that's bearable enough, and leaves you with enough information to know why Abby wanted to kill him, and actually care about her motivation, and now Ellie's goal to go after her. Joel was not brutally disrespected in this interpretation of the story. You can tell this because even through the brutal fist beating that he takes, his hair is in perfect condition through the whole ordeal. Giving Joel this send-off is worth investment because Pedro Pascal is a pretty well-known actor by this point and is deserving of not being infantilized for a petty jab by the game's creators and everything he stood for. While some people may view this choice too soon, which debatable, you know, I do very much resonate with those kinds of critiques, it maintains that narrative shock from the game while happening in a way that's totally consistent with all the characters and abilities. Heck, I was even rooting for Abby at this point because the show set it up so well. My goodness. And let's talk about Abby for a moment because another clear and obvious change was that Caitlin Dever, who has the look of Abby's face and is a very talented actress, was cast for this role despite not having the ridiculous proportions of the video game counterpart. Do you know why? Because it was over the top and crazy even for a video game. It was honestly hilarious coming from a game that tried so hard to capture realism with its motion capture and its presentation, but the pendulum literally swung the other way from Lara Croft's original design in Tomb Raider to Abby in The Last of Us Part 2. By casting a good actress who looks like a real person with real motivations, it's grounding the audience in what to expect from the series going forward. And like I said at the beginning of this video, this entire episode blew a hole straight through years of staunch defense from the game's creators and developers. And when push came to shove, when ratings and money were really on the line, Neil decided to cave by stepping aside and letting someone more competent handle the show, and not only just the show, but this specific decision. This is a cultural shift, and I believe the showrunners realized that if they stuck too close to what was in the game, the audience would not like it and dropped the show from that moment. The choice to make all these changes and somewhat salvage the story going forward is a bold one, and I personally think it's going to pay off in the long run. But all the controversial politics surrounding specifically the introduction of the game were removed to make a cohesive story. And I really think this can show the possible heights of this season. And it's one of my favorite episodes of television in a long time. I can't wait to see what they bring us next. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a real long time since I felt so passionate about this series that I had to rush to make a video for this. Everyone needs to appreciate how deep some of these changes were from the perspective of a person who loved the first game, didn't love the second game, and was satisfied with the first season of the show. I don't see myself doing specific episode reviews unless something really crazy happens, like major decision changes are made in the story, but I'll be sure to give you my post-season thoughts when we have them, and the fact that season 3 is already greenlit. Not really sure how that's gonna go, depending on where we're at right now, but let's see. I'm gonna have a little faith in the showrunners for where they leave us off. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. God bless, and I'll see you all next time.